It was an entreaty they had made so many nights before, and would again, for there was nothing so glorious as when the art stirred in them and surged through them, and their mind and eyes flickered blue-white and alive with power. Candlekeep's gates shone with the sun setting upon the west, breathing out cool salt air from the sea of swords. Lanterns guttered along the way of the Lion as two figures in travel-stained cloaks approached the keeper of the portal. The avowed who tended the warded threshold inclined his head at the sealed letters in their hands, then smiled when he saw the names and the seal impressed upon the wax. "Friends of Candlekeep," he said with a quiet relief, "be welcome and pass. Elminster, how are your daughters? I heard there were some rumblings near Shadowdale a 10-day past." Elminster offered a courtly bow. "Thank you for asking, Darrell. They are, well, I'll be off to see them after what should be a magnificent debate." His hat then tilted just so, pipe unlit out of respect. "Shadowdale is back to its usual bustling. Lady Maril Dreyer Hawkguard is doing a fine job. You really should visit sometime." Mordenkainen merely nodded, his eyes already measuring the lattice of abjurations spiderwebbed across Candlekeep's stone and sky. They crossed into the inner ward, beneath inscriptions, to Ogma and Denair, past the fountain, where students whispered citations to their various teachers, and climbed toward a high rotunda of polished oak and emerald-layered walls. 8 chairs waited there, carven, sigil-marked, each with a different hue ghosting its silhouette. A great leather-clad tome lay upon a stand at the center, closed with a clasp shaped like a griffin's tongue. The gallery above held a focused assembly, archmages whose robes were imbued with combinations of protection spells and faint traces of diamond dust caught between the layers, priests of Ogma, Denair, Gond, and Milil, local heralds ink-smudged with fresh blazons, and 2 high heralds, their chains of office glimmering and glistening through the orange hue as the sun continued to set in the west. Elminster and Mordenkainen took the narrow dais behind the gallery, a step higher than the 8 chairs. They neither presided nor hid. They observed, as agreed. A bell chimed once, twice, thrice, and the debate began. A circle of 8 chairs faced one another in the center, their legs uneven on the stone floor, worn smooth by time. Between them, the air was heavy with candle smoke and the musty perfume of parchment, a sanctum for arguments as old as the weave itself. From the first chair, a woman, cloaked in umber, rose and touched the air as if feeling for flaws in invisible glass. "Abjuration," she said, her voice calm through the various whispers. "Although it's hardly a simple matter to wield the magic that will produce a blast of fire or slay a giant with a word, the highest form of the mage's art lies at the place where magic interacts with magic. To study the school of abjuration is to wield spells that manipulate the fabric of arcane power itself. To abjure was to touch the fabric of power beneath all spells, to shield and sever, to shape the very threads of the weave." The second chair's occupant, a man with salt in his hair and a moon symbol in his ring, smiled. "Conjuration," he countered. "Have you considered the material plane is nothing but a small and unimportant crossroads in the cosmos? All that exists in this physical world is a mere reflection of the iconic truths embodied in the unseen worlds that border it. Should we not seek there, in the infinite beyond, rather than confine ourselves to this dim echo? To conjure was to master 5 sub-schools, to summon and bring beings from other planes of existence, to create and manipulate the fundamental elements of matter, to connect to the positive energy plane and the fugue, and finally a mastery of travel over the planar worlds, from the astral to the ethereal. A hush fell, broken only by the faint crackle of a dying candle. Then a young wizard in the third chair rose, her black pupils swallowing the light, a faint radiance haloing her skin. "Divination," she whispered. "History is full of missed opportunities, personal tragedies, and kingdom-shattering defeats that might easily have been averted, but for a single piece of information that could have changed the course of lives and worlds. Knowledge is power, and those who know all hold ultimate power in their hands. To understand divination in its arcane form was to bring back the curtain of forgotten truths, to delve into the mind and dreamscapes, to trace the lattices of the weave through time, and to see truth in the machinations presented by others to foil through deceptive spells. Laughter rose from the fourth chair. "Enchantment," said a soft-voiced elder. "The mind is the ultimate power. Any fool can oppose an enemy by physical means, but to halt a foe through the sheer force of one's will, or to turn a most hateful enemy into a loyal ally, is the purest and most subtly effective manifestation of arcane might. I say we focus on the mind first. To enchant is to magically manipulate and beguile the minds of humanoids and monsters. Some travel down the path of peace and bewitch the violent, while others magically bind the unwilling into their servitude." The fifth chair scraped sharply, and a broad-shouldered wizard stood, robes shimmering faintly with power. Evocation. The universe is the interplay of impersonal forces, some spiritual, some political, some moral, some elemental, and some whose natures have yet to be revealed. Beneath the surface of the merely physical, fundamental energies form the true nature of all things. To evoke was to embody the elemental forces within the cosmos, from the bitter cold of mountain peaks to the flames of elemental worlds such as the City of Brass, to the crackling lightning and thunder of storm giants and the mixtures of acid from which diabolical plots were often formed. The sixth chair held a woman who seemed to be there one moment, then appeared within the center of the 8 chairs, but a fraction of a moment later. I agree with focusing on the mind. I say we do it within the illusion school. As our first point of call, she said, the universe is all in the mind that perceives it, and sensation is the first and only reality. If a tree falls in the forest with no creature to hear it, then there is no tree. Do you agree, colleagues? To understand the illusion school was to focus on a form of magic that dazzles the senses, befuddles the mind, and tricks even the wisest to a playwright in which the savant is the director. They make the impossible seem real, and sinister practitioners use their illusions to frighten or fool others for their personal gain. Then came the seventh, a gaunt figure whose voice was the rasp of turning pages. "Necromancy," the seventh wizard intoned, and each of the wizards present tilted their chin by a fraction. "Life and death are one, for all living things die in time. Death is not an ending, but a beginning, since one's living days are but a fraction of the eternal existence of death. Life is but a useless distraction to the study and understanding of the long darkness to come. Life and death are the twin faces of eternal existence. To surrender to either one is to resign oneself to obscurity. True power lies in the twilight zone between life and death." The other 7 wizards sighed but nodded, with acceptance that all schools were useful to the balance of the weave. Necromancers explore the cosmic forces of life, death, and undeath. They animate the energy that flow from the living and unliving, and bring back souls traveling to the fugue for communication or to be their unwilling servants. They learn to sap the life force from others as the weave slowly destroys their body, and if the necromancer is not careful, their own as well. Not all wizards who utilize this school travel down the path of evil, however. The forces they manipulate are often taboo by many societies. Finally, the 8th chair creaked, and its crimson-sleeved scholar touched an iron acorn at his neck. "Transmutation," he declared. "Like a reflection of the larger processes by which worlds are built and torn down once more, all life is change. Anything that has ceased to change, to grow, to evolve from what it was, ceases to be a part of the world. And the ultimate power is that which manipulates these forces of transmutation. To master transmutation is to understand one key concept. The world is not a fixed object, but eminently mutable, and to change is the only constant to a master in this school. They wield the raw fabric of creation, learning to alter both the physical and mental forms of all things. They are the smiths on the forge of reality. In the wrong hands, they seek the power of the gods to make and destroy worlds. The arguments poured and braided, wards and doors, crossroads and fulcrums, whispers and quills, penning the rapport of each of their colleagues through their revisions and revolutions. The priests of Ogma and Denair annotated with nods. Gondites measured implications in clever machines of the mind. A Malil's minstrel cleric smiled in a quiet, perfect meter. The High Heralds asked few questions to document the lecture and debate for a record in the Grand Library. The bell chimed once more, and the chamber stilled. All gazes fell to the central tome as its clasp slithered open. Elminster twitched one eyebrow. "Ah," he said gently, "here's our evening's mischief. From one Volo, this is why I have gathered you all here." Mordenkainen's shadow leaned forward independently of its owner. "And to continue on today's debate, we look to take you through the 8 schools by Volothamp and Elminster as a first precursor to expanding all our understandings of the weave," he added. The avowed custodian gave a nod, and Elminster stepped down from the dais. He laid 2 fingers on the cover. "Pretentious thing," he said with fond exasperation, "but worth a chat. An initial pamphlet, this," he began, tapping the leather. "Volo's Guide to All Things Magical. Not even I would dare to pen something that purported to be a guide to all things magical. Volo did not even try. What he foisted upon Faerunians, hungry for enough secrets of magic to make them rulers of the realms, was a grab bag full of odds and ends about the arts. Notes about this and that, gossip and distorted fragments of spells and processes, copied from spell books on the sly, or misremembered from brief glimpses snatched in places, and on occasions when he dared not write anything down. In the interests of reader safety, I was forced to spearhead an exhaustive search for every last copy of his masterpiece of horrors. I think we got them all, and then convince him of the error of his ways. Just about every other mage who had seen the work offered to help in this little task. After due passage of time, I agreed that something called Volo's Guide to All Things Magical, that title, what an arrogant long nose, should become available across Faerun. That is why I discuss it with you here, with 8 of the wisest of the avowed, if only to stop greedy adventurers from getting themselves killed in the defences of every mage's tower between Evermeet and Karatur, in an attempt to gain a copy of the work rumoured yet to survive. Yet, mark ye, it was not going to be the same opus Volo, fondly thought of as his great gift to all seekers after magic. I set to work on the only copy of the text remaining, safely kept up to that point in my library, to expunge the worst of his distortions and just plain errors, in order to keep Faerun from being overrun with uncontrolled elementals and worse summoned extraplanar beasts, to identify just one consideration. And then, of course, a little minor surgery was necessary on what he got right. I really do not think the realms would be better off without any wizards around to keep the beholders, dragons, drow, orc hordes, petty sword-swinging tyrants, insane bane liches, and other evils at bay. And that is what would have happened if Volo's little list of carefully pilfered command words, phrases of activation, true names, and the like had fallen into the hands of the inhabitants of wider Faerun. Some things only the magically enlightened, whether wizards or priests, are meant to know, really. Accordingly, I considered just what delicate deletions to make, and then went out and got a good, sharp meat axe. When a small pile of tattered scraps of parchment were all that remained of Volo's opus, I set to work restating his fumbling prose into understandable terms and chopping the most irresponsible blow-up-all-Toril spells. What emerged is that which ye hold in your hands. A few fragments of useful material about magic. These are only the bones of Volo's colossus, of magical revelation, but at least they are now the right bones to keep the thing standing up. Spells found in other, recently released volumes of Realm's lore, by the way, for the most part, are not repeated herein unless substantial amplifications or corrections of earlier accounts are also included. With that said, the reader is warned that to act on much of the information in these pages is inherently dangerous and may even earn the dabbler some perilous foes. Moreover, much of the information herein is dangerously wrong. That is why we are here in the halls of Candlekeep, to ponder and scrap the dirt from the tome's inadequacies. For all my work, this tome is still a grab bag of this and that, and not a comprehensive guide at all. That is something that can probably never be written. Only the beings known to us as Mistra and Azuth could possibly encompass the subject, and I can conceive of nothing that would induce them to write a work that lays bare in a few pages what should take mortals a lifetime of careful study and experimentation to learn the paltry beginnings of. Let us go over the 8 schools, wherein each of you will be useful to further developing the tome. Elminster opens the tome as Mordenkainen raises his eyebrows slightly in an indirect sigh. Those specialist spellcasters tend to be regarded simply as wizards by the world at large, and treated accordingly. A distinction is frequently placed upon all the schools of magic for their acuity in specifically focusing on differing elements of daily and adventuring life. Illusionists, prized for their ability to entertain. Diviners, sought after for the secret information that is their stock in trade. And necromancers, feared for their sinister powers. All schools have their specialty and application when the opportunity arises. Abjurers. Although it's hardly a simple matter to wield the magic that will produce a blast of fire or slay a giant with a word, the highest form of the mage's art lies at the place where magic interacts with magic. To study the school of Abjuration is to wield spells that manipulate the fabric of arcane power itself. Abjurers are deliberate, prudent, and thoughtful, possessing an unequaled determination and resolve that allows them to carefully consider all aspects of a problem before devising an efficient and effective response. They generally regard adherents of other schools of magic as reckless and wasteful, and they continuously evolve strategies for defeating other wizards in magic duels, whether such confrontations ever become necessary or not. Whether their lives are given over to adventuring or experimentation, abjurers are always well prepared. The study of abjuration requires a meticulous and deliberate personality that generally favors a lawful alignment. Since abjuration often focuses on limiting the ability of others to do harm, many abjurers are inclined to walk the path of morality on the side of good. At the same time, the ruthless efficiency of abjuration used as a weapon against other spellcasters means that many wizards are drawn to the school by dreams of personal power that quickly override the orderly and benevolent philosophies of their fellows. Though abjurers are often reluctant adventurers, good abjurers sometimes take up the life to undo the evil that magic too often spawns. Good and neutral abjurers tend to position themselves where they can prevent others from victimizing folk who lack the ability to defend themselves. Evil abjurers are often found as lieutenants or elite advisors to sinister overlords, selling their valuable skills to the highest bidder. Abjurers make their homes anywhere, but most prefer smaller towns to large cities. They generally enjoy the trust and good regard of their neighbors, and are sometimes willing to use their power on behalf of others with little thought of compensation or reward. Conjurers. The material plane is nothing but a small and unimportant crossroads in the cosmos. All that exists in this physical world is a mere reflection of the iconic truths embodied in the unseen worlds that border it. Confident, headstrong, and opinionated, conjurers can often seem immodest and unconcerned with the difficulties of others, rarely inclined to think their way around any obstacle that can be more simply hammered down with the right application of summoned power. Because of the great control they wield over many dreadful extraplanar creatures, most conjurers view the other schools of magic with disdain. Illusion and divination are trivial. Transmutation and evocation are inconsequential. Abjuration and enchantment are too weak. And necromancy is repulsive, possibly because of all the schools, it alone can challenge the conjurer's sense of their own power. Conjurers must be strong-willed, decisive, and just a little bit reckless to excel in their chosen field, favoring chaotic alignments and preferring quick and decisive solutions over slower and more deliberate methods of problem-solving. Like necromancers, conjurers stare, unflinching, into the face of dark and powerful forces, and most rarely feel that they can afford the luxury of high, in other words, good, moral standards. As such, conjurers often favor evil and neutral alignments. Conjurers undergo adventures when the prospect of finding easy power and wealth seems to outweigh the risks and effort involved. They can be difficult companions, speaking their minds freely, and having little patience for the opinions of those they consider inferior. It takes a leader of proven worth and unyielding strength to earn a conjurer's respect. In an adventuring group, conjurers prefer action to discussion and tend to view overwhelming and immediate attack as the first step in any successful encounter. Most conjurers prefer to live in isolated frontier or wilderness areas, both because of their lack of interest in associating with those they deem beneath them, which is to say, most people, and as a means to practice the most dangerous aspects of their craft without worrying about the neighbors complaining or being eaten. Aside from magical research, conjurers shun all activities that would normally constitute a career or an occupation, and when funds are low, they simply summon creatures to fetch treasure for them. Diviners. History is full of missed opportunities, personal tragedies, and kingdom-shattering defeats that might easily have been averted but for a single piece of information that could have changed the course of lives and worlds. Knowledge is power, and those who know all hold ultimate power in their hands. Diviners are perhaps the wisest of all wizards. Like abjurers, they are often cautious and deliberate spellcasters, happy to avail themselves of every possible preparation and precaution before embarking on a hazardous course. For the diviner, though, the best of all possible preparations is to choose the course of action that will avoid conflict and peril altogether. While diviners aren't cowards, at least not all of them, few are likely to rush headlong into a fight before every other option has been exhausted. Diviners are students not only of the arcane workings of spells and magical lore, but also of the mechanisms of nature, the arts and sciences, and even human behavior. Few are better judges of character than diviners. In addition to being thoughtful and orderly in their affairs, diviners prize the quality of objectivity. A mind closed to any possibility, however remote or distasteful one may be, is a mind that might be closed to the truth, for the truth is not always simple or pleasant. Diviners are therefore strongly inclined toward neutral alignments and usually favor law over chaos. Good diviners use their powers to anticipate and prevent harm to others. Evil diviners use the knowledge they accumulate for their own gain. Diviners are not predisposed to the adventuring life, and many accept such a career only reluctantly. Still, with their judgment, cunning, and common sense, a diviner makes a valuable addition to most adventuring parties. In combat, though, diviners sometimes hesitate, overly conscious of the consequences of making the wrong choice when life and death are on the line. Diviners are loners at heart and do not make close friends easily. Even those who live in great cities tend to remain aloof and apart from their neighbors, avoiding interactions in the present to better study the past and the future. Although they show little interest in material possessions, diviners often cover their research and living expenses by charging for their services as seers, fortune tellers, and finders of lost objects and people. Enchanters. The mind is the ultimate power. Any fool can oppose an enemy by physical means, but to halt a foe through the sheer force of one's will, or to turn a most hateful enemy into a loyal ally, is the purest and most subtly effective manifestation of arcane might. Charismatic, sensitive, and passionate, enchanters tend to be personable and attractive, enjoying fine arts and good conversation. Even the most black-hearted enchanter can be a mesmerizing individual, confident, self-assured, and holding others in thrall with manner and word even before the first syllables of his charm spell are uttered. Other enchanters are distant and clinical, viewing themselves as coldly rational students of the only subject worth studying, the mind. Enchanters have few predilections in alignment, though their belief that individual will is the strongest force in the multiverse slants them slightly toward chaos over law. Evil enchanters believe that those who lack the ability to overcome or resist the power of the mind deserve to be servants to that power, existing only to be commanded by those with the ability to do so. Good enchanters adopt the viewpoint that bending another being to one's will is rarely right, but is preferable by far to killing. A good enchanter deprives an enemy of his volition only as long as he needs to, and, when such is warranted, often takes pains to return the subject to his normal state, in such a way as to avoid a traitor's punishment at the hands of his comrades or people. Enchanters are commonly the voice of reason in an adventuring party. They view physical combat as a last resort and work hard to devise options and solutions to problems that might otherwise elude their companions. Excellent team players, shrewd negotiators, and superb bargainers, enchanters favor frequenting or living in large towns and cities where they easily find many minds that they can study or manipulate with impunity. Evokers. The universe is the interplay of impersonal forces, some spiritual, some political, some moral, some elemental, and some whose natures have yet to be revealed. Beneath the surface of the merely physical, fundamental energies form the true nature of all things. The school of Evocation attracts the most serious-minded, intense, and determined wizards, devoted to the mastery of their craft to the exclusion of almost all else. Notable ascetics in their personal habits, evokers favor Spartan surroundings, simple garb, and plain fare, eschewing clutter and luxury as distractions that deaden one's perceptions of the real world. In personality, evokers are decisive, forthright, and often stubborn. Good evokers perceive evil as an unbalancing force that must be opposed, while neutral or evil evokers tend to be heartless, seeing the trials and ordeals of the world as the superficial results of a larger unseen world at work. Good evokers undertake adventures in response to the currents and forces they perceive in the world, striving to respond when and where evil stirs. Evil evokers, not content to settle for reaction to the universal forces around them, seek to manipulate those forces, altering their ebb and flow through their own actions. Regardless of alignment, evokers are natural leaders, fearless, inspiring, and authoritative. Among wizards, their courage on the battlefield has no equal. Evokers prefer quiet and plain homes, seldom dwelling among large numbers of people. More than a few are hermits, choosing to live in the most rugged and forbidding natural sites. Common people leave evokers alone, fearing their power and the danger their reputation suggests, a reputation that many evokers do little to discourage. Illusionists. The universe is all in the mind that perceives it, and sensation is the first and only reality. If a tree falls in the forest with no creature to hear it, then there is no tree. Illusionists tend to be flamboyant, outgoing, and self-assured, many exhibiting a hedonistic streak that can lead to dark and cruel practices in the pursuit of rare and unusual perceptions. Remarkably creative, illusionists enjoy art, literature, poetry, and music, and many are accomplished artists in their own right. Although their aptitude for scholarly pursuits is as great as that of any other specialist, illusionists spend less time in research than most, forgoing the isolation of the laboratory for the company of people and the constant thrill of manipulating the powers of sensation. Illusionists have sharp minds but are not particularly deep thinkers. Pragmatic by nature, they accept the impermanence of all things and see only futility in the acts of those who dedicate their lives to the development of all-encompassing philosophies of existence and meaning. Illusionists have no strong alignment tendencies. While good illusionists share their creative impulses for the benefit of others, evil illusionists sometimes take their worldview to dark extremes. The beings around them seem less than real toys and tools to be manipulated or destroyed like any other figment or shadow. An illusionist's forceful personality and sharp mind make them usually adopt a leadership position or right-hand strategist of an adventuring group. Like enchanters, illusionists know that their arts require an audience, and they enjoy the hustle and bustle of urban life, usually maintaining well-furnished homes in large and sophisticated cities. Necromancers. Life and death are one, for all living things die in time. Death is not an ending, but a beginning. Since one's living days are but a fraction of the eternal existence of death, life is but a useless distraction to the study and understanding of the long darkness to come. Brooding, humorless, and withdrawn, necromancers exhibit a fascination with life and death that borders on the obsessive. Though casual acquaintances will often view them as cold and hostile, those who befriend necromancers might come to know them as thoughtful, stoic, and loyal comrades. Most necromancers prefer solitude to companionship though, and even the most trustworthy and valued among them can be prone to black spells of despondency, during which they question the value of life and all things living. Continual exposure to the forces of death and undeath can have a corrupting effect on wizards who have even the slightest inclination toward evil. Consequently, evil necromancers far outnumber good-aligned ones. Neutral necromancers are rare, since most necromancers either have a will strong enough to resist the lure of darkness, or they submit eventually to its corruption. Necromancers have little tendency toward either chaos or law. Although a sense of order appeals to their clinical and meticulous nature, most necromancers are all too willing to turn their backs on the accepted norms of society in the pursuit of knowledge and power. Though necromancers are generally ill-suited for leadership, such an arcanist can make a valuable addition to an adventuring group, both for the formidable power he wields and a familiarity with the dark forces of the world that makes him virtually fearless. On the other hand, a necromancer is slow to follow orders simply for their own sake, and one who disagrees with his comrade's strategy might strike out on his own at any time. Necromancers, who are not adventurers, spend most of their time engaged in arcane research and writing, and since they have little need for the company of the living, they usually reside far from civilized regions, establishing homes in ancient castles, deep caverns, or even abandoned crypts. Transmuters. Like a reflection of the larger processes by which worlds are built and torn down once more, all life is change. Anything that has ceased to change, to grow, to evolve from what it was ceases to be a part of the world, and the ultimate power is that which manipulates these forces of transmutation. Wizards drawn to the specialty of transmutation are typically curious, sharp-minded, and deeply analytical, fascinated by the exercise of putting things together and taking them apart again. Transmuters are natural tinkerers, often more interested in objects than in the creatures who create and wield them. With minds attuned more to finding out how things work than to reasoning out why things are as they are, transmuters can be obsessive collectors, excellent scholars, and clear thinkers, but they aren't especially prone to profound philosophical insights. As a result of their focus on change and the forces that drive it, transmuters tend to see moral matters in terms of that change. Neutral and evil transmuters believe that good and evil are relative concepts, dependent on existing conditions and seldom permanent, and so they make little distinction between them. Good transmuters look past the universal constant of change to its effects on life, aspiring to ensure that change happens for the better. Regardless of their moral standing, transmuters favor chaotic alignments, for chaos is the essence of change. Eager to explore the world around them, transmuters are often eager members of adventuring groups, but in the role of loyal follower rather than reluctant leader, since they lack determination and rarely see the value in sticking to an inflexible purpose. The 8 chairs in the rotunda drew nearer by quiet inches until their shadows overlapped. One by one, the mages rose to ascent. Abjurer and Evoker, Illusionist and Diviner, Conjurer and Enchanter, Necromancer and Transmuter, each bowed a fraction to the others, as if acknowledging organs of one living body, senses and vein, heart and mind of the art. The clerics of Ogma and Denier noted the moment with neat strokes within the parchment they had been using to record the debate throughout. Elminster touched the tome's clasp. Mordenkainen set an arcane lock on the tome, a warded lattice that made future curiosity safe. "Aye, no school alone suffices," Elminster stated with a smile. "That is all for today. Let's reconvene tomorrow for a lecture on the spells and components of spellcraft from this tome." A high herald sealed the consensus with a simple blazon sketched in air, 8 lines meeting at a single point. They would read further from Volo's guide to all things magical, line by argued line, mirror by framed mirror, until the lanterns dimmed to pearls and the sea of swords asked one final question. What is the weave? Is it an essential element of the universe? Does it run through everything in unseen threads? Is it what makes magic possible? The 8 schools utilize the weave fully and precisely, but rather, the answer may lie in that it is the raw material from which magic is woven, not entirely unlike how a collection of threads is shaped and formed into a garment. Their study of arcana and the 8 schools leads to such a simple end: the ability to say merely yes or no.